So today we're going to go through vectors, just briefly and not too in depth, but we're going to go through all the key concepts in English, and then you'll have a good idea of the vocabulary you need to know about vectors in English as well. So vectors are a measurement, a type of measurement that has a magnitude and a direction. A magnitude and a direction. And we can depict or represent vectors as line segments, so just lines with an arrow. In Spanish, an arrow would be a flecha, just a point to indicate which direction the vector goes. The length of the line segment represents the magnitude of the vector. So if you have a small vector, 10 meters a second, it would look like this. If you have a vector maybe 20 meters a second, it would look much different. Yeah, it'd be bigger because it's a bigger magnitude, and so your line segment has to indicate that. Some things that we can measure with vectors are velocity. So velocity is speed with a direction. Force, yeah, fuerza, la fuerza, and acceleration, yeah. So let's take an example. Jane is walking in a straight line to a shop directly to the east of her home at 5 kilometers an hour. So how would we draw this vector? So there's Jane, and let's say east is to the right of her on the screen. So we would draw a line segment with an arrow pointing to the right, to the east, and we would also write the magnitude of the vector, 5 kilometers an hour. Okay, let's try another one. So Kobe is trying to lift a heavy table, and he lifts the table off the ground with 5 newtons of force. So how would we draw this vector? So we'd have a line segment with an arrow pointing upwards, and also we write the magnitude, 5 newtons, next to it. And now we can also add vectors, yeah? So to add vectors, we arrange each vector line segment so that the arrowhead of one vector segment touches the tail of another vector segment. And we do not change the relative directions of the vectors. Yeah? So it would look something like if you had one vector and you were trying to add another vector to it, you would take the head of the first vector and put that to the tail of the second vector, and you wouldn't change the directions of the vectors. And to find the sum vector is the vector that goes from the tail of the first vector to the arrowhead of the last vector. Yeah, so from over here to over here. And that would be your sum vector. So this vector would go from the start of the first one to the end of the last one, and that's your sum vector. So let's have a look at some examples. A ball in the air is traveling vertically upwards at 10 meters a second. And the ball is also traveling to the right horizontally at 20 meters a second. So what would the total velocity vector of the ball be? So what would the sum vector of the velocity of that ball be? So let's just draw in the vectors as they are said in the question first. So upwards at 10 meters a second, to the side at 20 meters a second. You can see that the one going to the side is much longer than the one going up because they have different magnitudes. And so to add them, we would take the 20 meter a second vector and put that tail at the end of the first vector, at the arrowhead of the 10 meters a second vector. Yeah. And then to find the sum vector, we take the start of the first vector and the end of the last vector, and we draw a direct line between them. And if you do some Pythagoras theorem, you'll find that the sum is 22.4 meters a second. So let's have a look at the last one. An object is being pulled by two people using ropes. John pulls the object towards the north with 5 newtons of force, while Bill pulls the object towards the south with 4 newtons of force. So what is the total force vector acting on the object? So let's draw the vectors as they are being described in the question again. 5 newtons north, 4 newtons south. And to add them, we take the second vector and put the tail at the head of the first vector. Yeah. And so what do we end up with? A 1 Newton vector towards the north. Okay, so hopefully this has helped, and good luck with everything. Yeah, until next time. Bye.